Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, Part 2 in my Nerdy Blu-ray Rewatch. That's what I'll be getting into today. What's good people? BK here, back with another episode for you here on Crewboy Productions on the Silly, Nerdy, and Wordy podcast. And this is going to be episode 105. Again, Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows. My Blu-ray Rewatch series continues. Hope everybody is doing very well today. And we are at the final Harry Potter film. And I really liked and enjoyed this movie. I had a great time. I was thoroughly invested in it. There were no slow moments. Maybe there was one, potentially, when Harry is talking to Dumbledore in that between space, spoiler alert. But this just was such a fulfilling, rewarding film. It's rewarding because watching it from movie 1 to movie 8 in this rewatch series that I've been doing, I just loved everything about this film. From the start, the tone and the darkness of it continuing, the middle, the end, everything in between. Just talking about my overall impressions, the progression of the story, of the characters, the action set pieces. Everyone had a moment to shine, not only the three main characters with Harry, Ron, and Hermione, but also the other kids as well. Neville had his moment to shine. It was just all so good. And all the kids were reunited again, along with the three main protagonists. So it was good to have that. And then I also like how this ended at Hogwarts, at the school. And I thought this was the perfect place to end this, to have the final battle happen at Hogwarts, where everything started, where everything is surrounding. So I love what they did there. This was a true ending, a battle. You could say this is kind of like it was an in-game type of ending to a certain extent, in terms of how this film went, in terms of what the characters went through, and then also you can say how Voldemort ultimately died, the way he died, in terms of the visually, comparing it to how he died and how Thanos dusted in Endgame. But truly loved everything about it in terms of how this film went. Truly great storytelling. So I'll just say right off the bat, if you haven't seen the Harry Potter films, I would highly suggest you watch them in order so you can get to know these characters and get invested in these characters and then see them grow and see the progression of them, of their stories. And then it'll have so much more meaning at the end when you see this in movie 8. But truly, I had a great time with this movie. So there's a couple of things I want to talk about and get into that are story beats as well as production things, and they both kind of coincide as well at times. And one of the things I want to start with, and it just happens to be at the top of the film, is when Harry is all of the characters, they're on this beach and at this house, and Harry goes into the room. Hermione or Ron are in the room with them, but it's basically Harry and Griphook having this conversation. And the actor that plays Griphook is Warwick Davis. I like what he did with the scene in terms of he was so calm, and yet the conversation between him and Harry was so much very intense in terms of how they were going and how they were negotiating in terms of Griphook helping the group achieve their mission at this point in the story. So I love what Warwick Davis was doing. And I also want to shout out Warwick Davis because he played two roles in this movie. First, the Griphook character, the Goblin, who ultimately dies once they get to the Ministry and they are escaping that. And then fast forward the story, you see Warwick Davis on screen again, but this time he is Professor Phileas Flitwick. And It's just very interesting for me because I don't think I've seen it too many times where you see an actor come on screen and for one, he's playing two roles. You see that. But then to see that character, the first character, die on screen, and then fast forward 10, 20, 30 minutes later, the same actor playing a completely different role is on screen. And to see that was a pretty interesting to see him in the final battle as he's talking to Professor McGonagall. And then also the one to kind of stick right here with the actor of Warwick Davis with a particular nerdy note here because yes, he played two roles in this film, but in terms of my understanding, at least what I think, he didn't get paid, twice for playing two roles, but his negotiated rate for this movie in terms of him getting compensated was most likely a higher negotiated rate because he played two roles in this film, doing two things in terms of having two sets of dialogue and of course the makeup and the prosthetics and the hours it takes to sit in that chair to get that and all the people involved to do that. So I believe the rate of the negotiated rate that Warwick Davis had is going to be higher because he played two roles. Now, if he just had the one role, perhaps the rate he has for playing two roles is not going to be the same for playing one role. That's just my opinion. I believe that's how it works. So just an interesting thing there in terms of, for one, the business side of it, and then also just the fact that he gets to do two roles, different roles, and then one character dies and then continues on for the rest of the film as another character. So that was interesting for me to see it. And when I saw that right away, I just had to take some notes on it because that was something I wanted to discuss here as I saw that. And then one of the things that really was great throughout this whole film, especially at the action sequences, was the music, the score of the film at points and the battles. And then particularly when the school was getting ready to be attacked and they were preparing, and then Professor McGonagall started the process of protecting the school with the charms, and then everybody else came in getting the charms surrounding the school and then eventually got protected initially. And one of the things that stood out to me was the score and the music, particularly the horns and the drums, when Voldemort and his army was just outside the castle and they started to attack the castle with their charms as it was going and hitting the protection spell that was over the school. But you could hear the music swelling up, the horns and the drums in that moment for the story. So I love what was happening there. And that's just something that was, again, this really stood out to me, the score and the music of this film. And then all the different action set pieces in terms of, the three characters running, escaping the fire there, and then obviously escaping the fire on the brooms, and then escaping the ministry on the dragon, on the creature there. And speaking of the ministry, one thing I wanted to say is the entrance to the ministry. I've noticed, and it's a thing that most movies do, the way they entered the ministry this time for Deathly Hallows Part 2, they entered it through a toilet, which is not the best way to enter the ministry, as they were disguised as the other characters to get the final Horcrux. But the way they entered the ministry, it was through the toilet this time. Now, if you've noticed, they always enter the ministry in different types of ways. I believe one other way in a previous one, they entered through the telephone booth. So they always try to change it up and do it differently and not do it at the same time. And so that reminded me of the Mission Impossible movies throughout all of the movies. Specifically when Ethan Hunt is getting his mission. He gets the mission, and then the voice says, this mission will self-destruct in 5 seconds. Now, in each of the movies, 8 of them, it happens in a different way each and every time in all of the films, because they try to change it up each time. Just like when they enter the ministry each time. It's not the same way the same time. So you have to do that. Just one thing that directors and film creators do, doing something, if there's something specific that they do each time, but they try to change it up, do it a different way, a fresh and unique way. So that was just something that stood out to me that I wanted to discuss. Also, one of the things towards the end of the film, right at the end of the film, when you have the time jump, there are two things. One, when they push the camera back, it kind of frames back. You see the train station from a higher level, and then you see the 9 3/4 there. I thought that was very nice that they showed that. And then also before the movie ends and the screen goes to black, the camera ends on the big three, the three characters, which I think is fitting, because it ends with a shot of the camera being on Harry, on Hermione, and Ron at the end once the kids are on the train and everything. So I love how they ended that there. And then moving backwards, as I move backwards from that moment, when the battle is over and Harry is now going into the Great Hall, and he's just walking down there, and he sees everybody, he sees all the rocks and everything is everywhere. But as he's looking to his left, he's looking to his right. I've mentioned before that you see there's a certain specific cast members, mainly the rest of the kids, that have been either they have been in all 8 movies, or they have been in the majority of the movies, meaning that they entered in movie 4 and they stayed on all the way through the end, or movie 5 through 8. And so I bring that up because as Harry is walking down the Great Hall after this battle is over, everybody is mourning their loss. They're tending to their their injuries, and they're consoling them. As Harry is looking and the camera switches to who he's looking at, you see the other kids that have been in all of the other movies, and just giving each of them a shot within the camera to see, hey, this kid, this girl, this guy has been in all 8 movies, and you just see each one of them. You see a couple seconds of a shot of them as Harry is walking down through the Great Hall. And of course, some of those characters were passed away in the battle, but you see each of them as he's walking down the Great Hall. So I just thought that was a very interesting and nice way to kind of show each of the characters, each of the kids that have been in all or most of the movies. So that was something that I saw that stood out to me, seeing that. And that was towards the end of the film. And then I mentioned the action set pieces. There were so many of them, and I enjoyed them all. And one of the most important things when you have any movie, but if you have an action movie that has so many set pieces and action set pieces there, the second unit director and their assistants become very important, because the primary director cannot be in every location to do everything. And so you have to have that trust there with your second unit directors and their assistants. And you have to have that there so that they can film those other action set pieces. And so it's important to have that great relationship. But then not all the time the primary director is going to have a history with their second unit director. Sometimes there will be times when the second unit director, that is going to be their first time working with that primary director. So that's when the primary director and everybody involved does their homework in terms of the previous projects that second unit director has worked on, as well as the stunt coordinators, stunt directors, because they also sometimes are second unit directors. So doing their homework and making sure that you are good with their previous projects and meeting with them so that you are all on the same page with doing these big action pieces that the primary director is not going to be doing. It's going to be the responsibility of that second unit director, and the team that he'll be working with along with the actors. So that is something I wanted to point out because there was so many set pieces in this movie, which I enjoyed. So hats off to all of the second unit directors and all of their assistants and everyone involved with this movie as well as this action set pieces. And another thing to get into was Professor Snape, which ultimately he dies, but as he did die, Harry got his tears. He went into Dumbledore's office and he saw and poured the tears in the dish and then saw the reveal of everything that was happening, how Snape was playing the long game and the instructions in terms of having to be the one to kill Dumbledore and how he was in love with Harry's mother, but it never happened, but he stayed in love with Harry's mother all the way to the end, even protecting Harry, even though he did it in his own way, in a double agent. So just seeing that reveal of everything, I could imagine that was kind of a big deal when it was happening in the theaters when the movie was first coming out. For those that have not read the books, but saw the movie and saw that for the first time, I can imagine that was like a light bulb, a aha moment when it initially happened, when the movie was first in theaters. But that was an interesting moment when that happened. And another thing to get into is just this movie and the franchise overall. So this is, for me, it's just really great storytelling where everything comes together. And it doesn't happen without the source material. The source material comes from the books, from the writer J.K. Rowling. If you do not have these great stories in the books and these great characters, then we don't get the movies that we get. But that is just one part of it. So we have the great source material from the books, from the author, but then you have to have that adapted into the movie, into a screenplay. The screenplay writer for this movie is Steve Clovis, but all of the screenplay writers for all of the movies, you have to have the screenplay writer to adapt it. Now, you cannot take every single detail from the book and put it into the movie and it'll be great. That just doesn't work that way for a multitude of reasons. For one reason, because it just can't practically work. For another reason, it probably may be too expensive for that to happen. There's just so many different variables. So there are some things that you can take from a book and put in a movie and it'll be fine. And then some things you have to change completely or change a little bit or do different casting, the character. So many different things. It's the same thing with comic books. You can't take everything in the comics book that the MCU, that Marvel and DC, and put it in the movie. It's not going to work that way. You have to make certain changes in certain areas, and then there's certain things that you can keep and certain things that you can't keep. But it has to come from the source material, and then great source material, and then of course it has to be adapted into the movie and written, and then having the right people and then the right departments to bring everything together. And that's what we got with this movie and all of the movies. And again, I truly enjoyed this movie, such great storytelling, and it just was very rewarding to watch it from movie 1 to movie 8, and just seeing the character development and progression of the three main characters of Ron, Harry, and Hermione, and some of the other characters as well. And one of the things that, because this is such great stories and characters, that's why this franchise did so well for Warner Brothers, which is the studio that released these films. And so one thing I wanted to talk about is the box office for these films. And I'm getting this information from Box Office Mojo. Now, overall, all 8 of these films made a total of estimated $7.8 billion, slightly over $7.8 billion, all 8 films in total worldwide. 2 of the 8 films did crack the $1 billion mark. That was movie number 1, Sorcerer's Stone, slightly over $1 billion. And then the final movie, Deathly Hallows Part 2, that one made an estimated $1.3 billion per Box Office Mojo. The lowest total amount of all 8 of these films was movie number 3, Prisoner of Azkaban. That was at $810 million. The second lowest one was movie number 2, Chamber of Secrets, $888 million. And then 4 of the 8 movies were in the $900 million mark. So very successful franchise for Warner Brothers because it was such great story and such great characters, and adapting these characters and the story and the different parts of the book into the movie, as well as all of the people in places in the different departments, casting with the actors, the directors, and all the different people in the different departments. So well done to everyone. And so I just wanted to talk about the box office, considering how this is the final movie. And so I thought it'd be fitting to just talk about the box office for this movie here. So really, really enjoyed it. And then I think one of the final things I'll say I want to talk about is the wand battle between the final wand battle between Harry and Voldemort. When you see them fighting with the wands and the green and the red is kind of flowing back and forth as they're pushing each other, going back and forth there. So that was a pretty great scene to see as you're watching a movie. Now, behind that, I want to talk about is because the 2 actors, Ralph Fiennes and Daniel Radcliffe, they have the physical wands in their hands. However, what is coming out of the wands is not put in until after the filming is done in post-production. Of course, many of you most likely already know that. But what I want to talk about is, yes, they have their wands in, but they have to physically and just give themselves into it and use their imagination as if the magic is coming out of the wands. And they have to do that and to play and pretend as they are pretending, because they are actors, but they have to make those movements and do that. And then, of course, the visual effects team comes in and puts the magic that comes out of the wands after the filming is done. But it's just interesting that they have to do that and pretend that that's what's happening, and then we ultimately see the final product. But as they're doing it live, I would love to see how, that is done when they're filming it, when nothing is coming out the wands, but they have to do that and put that effort in. So just something I wanted to talk about and discuss. But again, hats off to the visual effects team. Really, really great job with that overall, and just in all the different parts of this movie, as well as all of the other films there. And that, I think, is all I want to talk about today for this Deathly Hallows Part 2, which I really enjoyed. And if you haven't seen it from movie 1 to movie 8, I would suggest that you recommend that you watch it in order and enjoy that progression and character development, and you will get rewarded when you get to movie 8. I really believe that. So I really enjoyed it. It's such a great rewatch, and I think it really holds up. So if it's 10 or 20 years from now and you go back and watch movie 1 to movie 8, I think it's just going to be just as good now as it was when it came into theaters, as it is right now, some 20 plus years later. But I really enjoyed doing this, and I'm looking forward to getting into other series and getting back to other series, as I've already started Lord of the Rings. So I have 2 more of those movies to do. I've already done Fellowship of the Ring, so I'll be getting into that, as well as Hunger Games and other franchises and standalone movies as well. So I hope you guys enjoyed that breakdown of this film and all 8 films. I did do pretty much all of them except for one. I think There's one of them that I didn't do, but I briefly talked about it. But I have an entire playlist of Harry Potter rewatch full episodes, as well as many, many nerdy notes, shorts, production featurettes from these films. And so check that out. It is here on the channel. So subscribe here to Crew Boy Productions. You can follow the podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Just search for the Silly, Nerdy, and Wordy Podcast and follow there. And I have these shorts on TikTok at Nerdy Podcaster 124, as well as Crew Boy Productions on Instagram. You can follow me there as well. Hope all of you guys have great vibes for the rest of your day. And until next time, we will talk soon.